big reserves of operating capital like the bigger companies do. And so they really need access to finance to get them through. Loans, not grants, loans. Sometimes grants, but they mostly want loans. They're good business people, and they don't need charity handout, but what they do need is finance to help smooth out the peaks and the troughs of consumer demand. And I would say we haven't really seen the response that we need to see in terms of getting finance to small and medium enterprises, especially those that are really vital for keeping nutritious food and safe food flowing throughout the food system. And then finally, we've really seen an appreciation of food safety. When food is not safe, it's not really food. It doesn't do anything for us if it's unsafe. We know that unsafe food accounts for 600 million cases of illnesses every year. And we know that children under the age of 5, who account for 9% of the population, account for 39% of the cases of foodborne illness. So there's been a real appreciation of the need to keep markets open and keep them safe. And we've seen a lot of development with the World Health Organization. My own organization, GAIN, has been working with WHO to develop protocols to keep fresh food markets open and informal markets open with lots of unpackaged foods and wet food markets. This is where most people who are at risk of malnutrition, or at least undernutrition, that's where they get their foods from. So we've seen a big hit in terms of food consumption, less food, worse food. And we've seen a big stress test of the food system, but we've seen wherever there has been stress applied, we've seen positive responses, I would say, with the exception of small and medium enterprises. And the UN Food System Summit that I'm working in is trying to develop a financing facility that gets capital to small and medium enterprises that are important for keeping food, healthy food, flowing through the food system. So my final comment, colleagues, is, if you look at the Chinese symbol for crisis, it's composed of two components. One component says threat, and the other component says opportunity. We faced the threat, and I think we're beginning to seize some of the opportunities. The phrase you hear a lot is building back better, building forward, because we want to go back to what we had pre-COVID, to in many ways build forwards better. And I think that's in terms of the what we do, and I'll give some examples of the what, also how, and a lot from the put to the vaccine record times, they set aside ego. They collaborated in many cases for the first time because the situation demanded it. So I'm looking for weeks across the piece in the food system and in the mechanisms to do the same, to come together, to put aside territories, politics, and come together, because if we don't do something about food systems in the context of the COVID crisis, we're going to be looking at much worse hunger and malnutrition numbers in the future. It's costly to do this now. It's going to be even more costly to do it in a year or two's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence. I think that here we all agree that we must act now, and we're here engaged to continue our work that every wholesale market in the world is doing of really providing healthy food to as many citizens as possible. We're going to continue now with Jamie Morrison, that is the Director of Food System at FAO Rome headquarters, and is going to introduce us also with a snapshot and then how can we envision this transformation of the food system. Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eugenia, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. I'd like to thank the organisers for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I particularly welcome the focus on the future of food in the post-COVID-19 world. During the evolution of this pandemic, important questions have been asked about how agri-food systems can be managed better to avoid such events turning into food security, nutrition, and livelihoods crises. Many of the points that Lawrence has already elaborated on. But I think also in this regard, there is increasing consensus that advancing on the agenda of agri-food systems transformation requires the active engagement of cities and local stakeholders. So why have cities emerged as a key entry point? Carolyn's provided a number of answers to this question already, but I just wanted to emphasize that over half of the global population currently resides in urban areas. And this is expected to rise by 2/3 by 2050. Now, if 70% of food which is produced globally is already consumed by inhabitants in areas classified as urban, this percentage will clearly increase further with urbanization. But it's also very important to keep in mind that in many urban and peri-urban communities, there is particular exposure to food and nutrition insecurity. And this is often combined with high rates of overweight and obesity. And I think moving forward, we really need to keep an eye on this potential hotspot in urban communities as one which will need to be addressed. But why re-engage with cities now? I mean, issues related to components of food systems, such as urban agriculture, have long been prioritized. Carolyn touched on some of these. They found their way into FAO's program of work over the past 3 decades, and also many other fora. However, I think it's our increasing understanding of the interconnections between the different components of urban food systems, including processing, distribution, consumption, and importantly, governance, and also the links between urban, local, and national food systems, which are becoming progressively tighter due to demographic shifts, urbanization, and also technology. And it's, I think, becoming clearer to many of us that exploiting these links will go a long way to transforming the agri-food system. And what we found in our work is that cities have enormous potential when it comes to food systems transformation. Last year, we did a survey fairly soon after the emergence of the pandemic. It was undertaken in April and May to assess the impact of COVID-19 on urban food systems. And what this demonstrated was that the cities had a central role in limiting the effects of the pandemic on health and food security of their citizens, and also their efforts to ensure continued access to food for the most vulnerable. The responses that we received through the survey covered many different typologies of cities, from metropolitan to intermediary to small cities and rural towns across all regions of the world. And this generated very rich insights into the types of challenges that were being faced, but also the approaches that were adopted. But I think overall, an important message that came through was that although actions were being taken at the local level, in many cases, these were not sufficiently supported by appropriate resources and coordination with actions at national level. So there's an urgent need to recognize the catalytic role that cities have in overall food system transformation. And we have a really great opportunity to elevate the voices of urban and local actors and to allow them to play that catalytic role. And here I refer to the Food Systems Summit, which has been referred to by many of the speakers today. In relation to this process towards the summit, last year, FAO, along with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, set up the establishment of an Urban Food Systems Working Group. This is an informal interagency group with over 25 organizations and city networks currently represented. And this working group has been very active in promoting the engagement of cities in the summit process. For example, facilitating independent dialogues in 26 cities, nominating city champions, and recently 3 mayors were added to the Food Systems Summit Champions Group, for example. But also in submitting potential game-changing solutions, which are now being developed towards coalitions as we move towards the pre-summit and eventually the summit. And finally, just on this slide, it refers to it. On Monday, we're organising a global summit dialogue on cities, which will be co-convened with the Special Envoy, Agnes Calabata. And as a result of these actions, I'm happy to say that cities really are now recognised as a key constituency within the summit process. And I think that that'll be very promising moving forward. But getting back in a bit more into the sort of practical detail about how cities play their role and can be supported to play their role. What we found during the COVID-19 pandemic was that many local governments established municipal coordination teams to ensure access to nutritious food for all, and to help them to identify and to connect food system actors, which allowed them to explore innovative community-based solutions to the challenges that COVID brought. For example, multi-stakeholder urban and territorial food governance mechanisms, such as food policy councils, can be fundamental for promoting agri-food systems transformation and structured interconnected actions, including in cases of emergency. Many food governance mechanisms have demonstrated the ability to support local governments in the development of food systems preparedness plans and adaptive measures, including other actors such as civil society organizations and the private sector. And FAO, working together with many partners, has been supporting the establishment of these participatory and inclusive processes, with food governance mechanisms already established or in the process of being established in cities such as Nairobi, Kisumu, Kigali, Tana, Lima, Quito, and Porto Viejo. Many entry points exist to bring about changes in urban food systems, but I want to focus on two: improvements in food distribution, including through the wholesale and retail sectors, and also the optimization of last mile logistics, which are being increasingly prioritized by municipalities. So in this regard, mapping local markets using geospatial information has become a key step in understanding market systems. This food supply mapping has been particularly useful during the COVID-19 emergency. A couple of examples: FAO's supported local governments in mapping territorial markets in Tanzania and Malawi. And we've also mapped over 300 food markets across the Dakar metropolitan area through geospatial information systems to try to better understand the food retail and wholesale market system in the city, and with a particular focus on helping to prevent food desert areas, i.e. areas with limited access to nutritious food, which emerged during the emergency situation. Improving last mile logistics is also fundamental. And one example here is from Lima, where the municipality has supported the decentralizations of the wholesale market over the past year or so, with a mobile wholesale market service being established to distribute food to 8 districts in the Lima metropolitan area, which again has helped to ensure more efficient and safer food distribution systems. So I think in closing, I would say that there is no doubt that a greater focus on urban food systems will be critical in delivering the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I've illustrated in the brief presentation that FAO is increasingly prioritizing its work and support to urban food systems as major promoters of local and national economic and social development. We also view urban areas as important poles for integrating local food systems and for leveraging their potential to create employment,